Yeah, it's mindset cafe, we all about that mindset. Gotta stay focused, never settle for less. It's all in your head, how you think you manifest. So get ready to rise, cause we about to be the best. Gotta switch it up, gotta break the old habits. Get your mind right, turn your dreams into habits. No negative vibes, only positive thoughts.
What is up, guys? What is up? Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Cafe podcast. It's your boy, Devin, and today we are joined by an awesome guest who I had the honor of being on his podcast as well, so make sure you check out that episode. But we had such a great time on his podcast. I told him, I was like, man, we got to run this back and have you drop some knowledge for the Mindset Cafe. But Nathan Newberry, he is a husband, he is a father of 3, and he is a high performance business strategist who has built and sold his own agency and led sales teams generating over $1 million a month. And he's basically created a system that he calls the AI Freedom Method. So we're going to dive into all of that. You know, I don't want to give away too much of his story because I like to hear it straight from the source, which I know you guys do as well. But without further ado, Nathan, thank you so much for hopping on again with me and running it back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm pumped to have your listeners hear my story and hopefully resonate a little bit so they can learn and scale as much as they can.
So let's start off. I mean, before we dive into, what you got going on now, I always like to get some background, right? So what was your journey like becoming an entrepreneur? What was your childhood like? Like, what was the route that you took to become the version that you are of you today?
Yeah, dude, I was a pastor for years, Christian pastor. And I never thought I'd make any money. I thought I was there to serve people. My dad was a pastor. My grandpa was a pastor. My cousin, my brother, my uncle, just the whole family were Christian pastors. And that's what I thought the lane was for me. And I remember my wife and I, we did missions for a little bit after years of doing ministry. We came back and I'm like, what the heck do I do now? And I remember there's this old Protestant pastor, Jonathan Edwards. He said this, he's all, make as much money as you can, save as much money as you can, and give as much money as I can. I was like, all right, if I'm not going to give in the capacity of selling Jesus and telling people about Jesus, I'm going to go figure out how to make as much money, give as much money to the kind of those causes and things and help as much as I possibly can. So it was just a shift in mindset of all right, now let's create some wealth so I could help more people. And that went on a journey to figure out everything. And so I ran a marketing agency for 9 years, and I did that. And then I sold it to my business partner. And then now I got into high ticket sales and I did that for years. And then I did really well because I cared for people, and I think that's a big thing. We could riff on, some things like that around sales of why people suck at it and why people stop doing it, but the need for it and doing it well. And then I started managing sales teams, where we did millions a month just because we started leveraging doing the right things. And then now I help people with the right, components of getting the right lead generation going on in their business and online business. And then, building sales teams, doing media teams, and then just creating, sort of the online infrastructure that people need to be successful online. And it's easier than people think. It's just a different empire. It's a different growth mindset. It's a different perspective of building things that isn't taught anywhere. So,
no, I mean, it's interesting though, because I mean, one of your core values, what it sounds like, it was, to impact people, and that's something that we have in common. Mm-hmm. And going from being a pastor and helping people with their spiritual journey and their faith and everything like that, to being able to give back and understanding that if you're able to basically lead with, people first, and having people at first foremost, like the profits and everything that all comes, but you have to have that desire of understanding, you're dealing with people. Yeah. And when they're appreciated, when they're felt taken care of, it's reciprocated. Right. And so my question though is, what was that moment that was that initial light bulb that you didn't want to continue down the pastor road?
I don't know if it was a switch. It was more of just what capacity, God calls us to disciple as many people as we possibly can. I don't think that journey ever ends or has it where it's your full-time vocation, right? It's just a shift in the ability to do it full-time or doing it where you can help people in different levels. I still serve in our church. that we're local. We still connect, we give, we, have a fellowship at our own home. We give our kids private school. We do all those things we possibly can to be in the community and culture. And, I coach my kids, T-ball, that type of thing, where it's just like you're constantly, in the world, but just not of it. Right. But, this is where the big framework for me, I tell two different things. One, it was back when I first started my first entrepreneurship journey. I scaled really fast because I figured out the marketing stuff. Okay. And the first entrepreneurship journey was I had a fencing company that turned into a construction business that just got out of hand, and I hated my business. Okay. I had 12 guys in my payroll, trucks, offices, materials. But then I had people like stealing from me, not showing up. It was just kind of a rough people that I was hiring. It was just not my world. But I did figure out all the marketing thing. I figured out I had the only person that had the website in the Valley, the only person that was answering the phone calls when people had it. I was diligent, I was on it. But there was a breaking point. I fired everybody on my payroll. Okay. And I was like, I'm finishing up all these jobs because of everything. I had a bad CPA, tell me, hey, you're going underwater or this and that. And I just had projects that were just like looming that I needed to finish up. But of course, CPAs know everything, right? And so it was just a bad advice that I got, and I had to just clean house. And it was a moment, though. Everybody has these moments where there's a line in the sand where it's like, nobody's coming to save you. You got to figure this out. And I remember a drive in me that I never had before, the limits of capacity of the growth that you had to do. Like, you just had to do it. And that was a really great learning moment for me, because firing people was never fun, like selling things off, cleaning house, work, like just getting all the projects done, like telling someone that you had a big contract with, look, I can't do this anymore. Let me give you money back and be done with it. I had the IRS, call me. I had like creditors call me, saying, hey, you need money, like all those challenges that entrepreneurship had to deal with. And I remember it felt suffocating, but it was also the growing moments where it's like, all right, now I need to figure out how to do this business right. And I shifted into marketing and just read all the books, got the mentors, made money, saved money, gave money, really kind of just stacked as much as I possibly can because I got that light in the fire. And I think everybody has to hit those challenging moments to really kind of waken you up in a way to grow. And something that my pastor told me, and I really liked it, I said, the role of a man is 4 things. And this is what I teach a lot with this. And I didn't know who, oftentimes in sales or even in business in general, people need to know who they are. And they don't know oftentimes who they are or where they're coming from. And this is really where the role of a man is 4 things. You need to lead, love, protect, and provide. Lead, love, and protect, and provide. And if you can't do those sort of things, it's challenging. And so this is why I'm a big advocate of being an entrepreneur, even if it's a side hustle while you're working, is you need to provide so much. Out of the 4 corners of the stones of all of those, you got to be able to provide well enough, because if your wife is making more than you, there's going to be challenges in the marriage, right? If you're not making enough money in the thing, then your kids are going to be in the bad neighborhood and it's going to be rough and it's not going to be a good part of things where you're just going to not be in that stuff. And your wife is not going to be able to respect you. You're not going to lead your family well. You're not going to feel confident in those roles. So really cornerstone is providing. So what can you do to make money is going to really kind of help that future of it. It's not everything, but it's really helpful when you have some of those things that can provide and give some outlets for you and your family to kind of be able to do more for your family, your kids, your wife, your community, for your church. And so do the hard things even when it's so suffocatingly hard. Is what I kind of learned.
No, definitely. And I love that you said that, sometimes we come to this, you have to draw the line in the sand and that no one is going to save you. And that's what I think people don't realize in life, not just in entrepreneurship, but in life, like you are responsible for both the actions and the inactions that you take or don't take. And you have to want it. And whether you feel like it or not, you have to do it if you truly want it. And something that you mentioned, you have to know who you are it's funny because I literally just put a quote up last night on social media. I was reading or listening to essentially Relentless by Tim Grover. I've listened to it like this is my third time, just when I'm working out. And he said a quote in the book, and I put it on social media. It was, "You need to know who you are in order to achieve what you want to achieve." And so it was crazy that you had mentioned that as well, because it is so true. Sometimes, we're trying to figure ourselves out, and we say we want this, but it's, we're not doing anything that aligns with that, or any actions that, align with that. It's like, you need to know who you are and what you want as well. Right. And so sometimes you do have to self-reflect, and maybe it is you have a weakness in one of those 4 pillars, if you are a man. And again, I agree, like it's very basic, but at the same time, like, it is very true, right? Those are the kind of the 4 cornerstones of being a guy. And as much as society wants to tell us it's not, and I know it's controversial, it is what it is. That's how it is. Like, they say that the only, people that are loved unconditionally essentially are children and women, and essentially, like animals, but that's like, typically, like, those are the like unconditional love. It's like, if your wife doesn't work, like, you still love her, you're the one who supports her. If you all of a sudden just stop working, again, your value is kind of tied to those 4 pillars. Right. Unfortunately. Right. And so I think it's so true and so important that you mentioned it. What was some of those mindset shifts that you had to have going from, because going from pastor to entrepreneur was already, a complete identity shift, but also a mindset shift that you were kind of alluding to. But then the mindset shift that you had from going to construction to going to the marketing agency is interesting, because you found an area of business that you liked, or that you did well at, right, within the construction industry. And you're like, well, I do this really well. Like, I'm the only one that's doing this part of the business. I could just build another business only doing that one part of the business. So what was that mindset shift during that process of starting that agency?
I don't know if it was a mindset. It's like sometimes these things fall into your lap, like, and you're trying to figure out what to do, until, people point those things out that are kind of obvious. Like, I'm hard-headed, and sometimes I don't know, what I'm doing. So I'll give you an example of how hard-headed I am sometimes. Like, I'm a big vision guy. And so sometimes when I tell my wife things like those ideas, she thinks they're reality when I'm just brainstorming. Right. Yep. And I don't know if anybody account for that. I love my wife, but it's sometimes hard to have those visionary idea and she's learned that that's not what we're going to do. It's just like an idea, it's like, hey, we should go, like I was just on a podcast before, and this guy moved to in France and in Paris, and you're like, honey, let's go like live in Paris for a while. That'd be cool. And she would think, now, not now, she knows, but like, we're going to move to Europe, what's going on, what's all, like, okay, that's a side note. But I told her anyways, I was like, man, I really want to just be coaching people rather than me just doing all the fulfillment. Like, I love doing the sales part because that's all I have to do. Like, so this is what I found out as a business owner. There's 4 skills that you have to have. You need to know how to market yourself. You need to know how to sell your service. You need to know how to do the fulfillment. And then you also need to build systems and then run teams, right? Those are a lot of skills you have to learn. What I love about Robert Kiyosaki in his book, with his rich dad, just talking about, hey, you should just learn how to do sales. That will help you in all the endeavors you do. That's out of the 4 skills, you only have to do 1. I didn't have to do the fulfillment. I didn't have to market those leads. All I had to do was just do the sales. And I got really good at that because that was just one lane of one skill, and you master that, and then you can learn some other skills. And so I wish I did it the opposite way, where I learned how to do sales first and then marketing. They overlap a lot. But all that to say is I was like, I just love like strategizing. And I told my wife I'd love to do it. And I was waiting for some pushback, right? But then people in my life, and this is how you do it, is just your wife's like, you would be great at that. You should definitely do that, which was a different perspective than what I thought. But I'm blockheaded sometimes. I don't think, that I am that type of person until, your loved ones come around. So all that to say is, I think if people are trying to figure out, hey, what lane do I go into, is sometimes just asking those kind of questions. Nowadays, you can even ask ChatGPT to help you kind of reason on some of these things. and take those personality tests is really helpful for people to kind of just figure out what those lane of things are. And dude, I coach this all the time. You'd be surprised. The biggest thing that someone needs when they're building an online business is actually like an irresistible offer. But more often than not, when I take people on as clients, they still don't know what their offer should be or what they do. And they're generalists. And we want to like pinpoint. And so some of the conversations I have is like, hey, let's pinpoint this is it, and then just get it narrowing it down where it's like a killer offer. And then they feel aligned with it. So the goal with, online business or a business in general is to be in that sweet spot where what you're doing brings you life, not takes it from you. Right.
Right.
And there's some people in your life, in your business, that are like, if all I did was just build websites, or if all I did is build Excel spreadsheets, or all I did was accounting, or all I did was whatever in your business, you hit that lane. There's different personalities with different types of acumen and desires. And so I think everybody needs to find those things that they really want to do and just not work on their weaknesses as much, but like work on their strengths and live into those strengths, and then build systems and teams around it to help you support that vision.
No, and I agree with everything you said. The interesting part to me is like with your frustration of, kind of closing up shop with the construction, right? And your first essentially run at entrepreneurship, not going the way that, you would envision it, right? Most people would get discouraged right there because what they thought was going to be essentially they open a business and now they get all their time back, because that's what social media tells you nowadays, 4-hour work weeks and so forth. And it's like you closed up shop and then you turned around and opened up another business, right? And so most people wouldn't have that innate drive to want to try again. What was going through your head on in realizing that this time didn't work out? That's fine. That doesn't mean it's game over. That just means let's play a new game.
Man, oh man, that's a good one, man. This is, that's the difference between winners and losers. And that's like, if it was my wife's opinion, I would have never started a business, but I'm not wired that way. And she's kind of expected, like, all right, he's just going to always do this. Like the other day, I'll tell you, like my wife's like, hey, I'm in San Diego on vacation, and someone picked up our mail and put it in our house, taking care of some of this stuff. Right. And they're like, honey, you just got this thing in the mail. It's like, it's a new LLC I created. Did I tell her about it? No, because I'm starting another freaking business, like, and I was like, yeah, I'm just starting there. Okay. She kind of expected it sort of stuff, but it's like over time, it's like, you just kind of keep on building. It's just like relentless. Like I don't know. Everybody's wired differently, and I've expected and just understood that I'm going to be understood. And I just don't care anymore, like what people think or what I'm doing. I'm just going to grow. I just want to expand and do what I possibly can. It's fun to grow and scale. And if you have that mindset, you're odd. You just need to be around those other odd people like me and you, Yeah. Otherwise, then you won't feel as estranged with that. I think that's the other part. And then you get around some other amazing people, and they're doing some major level things that you're like, man, I'm not playing as big as I probably should. Like, what's going on? So that's why you need to be around other, major players, because then they kind of level you up to think bigger, to do bigger. And that's the type of thing. It's just like, it was hard to shut that business down, but at the same time, it's just like, well, I just got to keep on going, keep on moving. And this is where it's like, when I talk to entrepreneurs, here's the difference. It's like, yeah, it's going to be hard. You're probably going to fail the first few times that you're going to do it, and it's just to keep on pushing forward. You don't have a B option. You just keep on doing it, and make it happen, and you have to pivot along the way, but it's okay. It's just the part of the process,
No, definitely. And it's funny because, my wife is the same, it sounds like, as your wife. And believe me, I know we're probably not the most easy people to be married to.
No.
So, but what's funny about that is like, because a lot of people, again, think that entrepreneurship is easy. Being an entrepreneur, you could tell people with an honest answer, it's not easy, right? especially in the beginning. There is going to be long days. Like you trade a 9 to 5 for a 24/7, essentially, especially in the beginning. Do you get your time back? 100% from building systems, from building teams, and so forth. But in the beginning, you got to wear all the hats. Like you don't have like if you don't have systems and processes in place, how is your team going to implement stuff that you don't even know how to implement yet? Right. So the crazy thing about it, though, is the difference that I saw in you and even in myself from my journey of, of entrepreneurship too, is like, that's the difference, not only between winners, but from true entrepreneurs and people playing entrepreneur. Right. They want the title. They want to call themselves an entrepreneur, but then it gets hard. Things don't work out. And they're like, well, it's not for me. I'm out. Right. And it's like, so when anything gets tough, that's what's going to happen. Are you becoming fit? Are you a fitness enthusiast? Or are you just playing that role right now? Right. Well, like it can go into any area of life. Right. So I think that's amazing. Like the way you said it, because at the same time, like it is as straightforward as it is. That's what separates, winners and losers, So the next thing I want to kind of dive into, though, is something that you kind of mentioned a few times is about systems, right? And I think that systems are so important, and the mindset of why they're important is what I'm wondering what you have, because one of the things you mentioned is that it's systems over hustle, right? So what does that kind of allude to for you, and why should people want to, or at least have the mindset that they need to have systems in place?
Yeah, the method that I teach is the AI freedom method. Overall, like what we all want in our life is freedom, but we kind of categorize it and I bucket it in these three ways. You want more money. That's always helpful. You want more time, flexibility, and freedom to work on the things you want to do, or have the flexibility to be able to do what you want. The other one is impact. And that's a unique one. That's a wiring that God gave us all. We draw a lot of significance and fulfillment from the service of others. Okay. And, and this is where there's a lot of service-based business, because God's wired us to serve other people. How often do you see a bear, a deer, a skunk go and serve other skunks? Yeah. It's an internal wiring, a human thing that God talks about. He made us in his own image. So we draw a lot of that significance and fulfillment from the wiring that God gave us. And so that's a good part. Now it's like, what can you serve people and with the top level you possibly can? But you need to come with a full cup. You're not coming with a full cup, then you can't have the overflow of pouring out with other things. And so, you and I are at the early stages of having kids. That's not always easy. So there's different seasons in life that I figured out, where it's like It's easier to be able to do the hustle and grind and build when you don't have those young kids, waking up multiple times a night, where you have to, help them survive a little bit, but overall it's like the AI freedom method is embracing the goal of the freedom, but then figuring out the systems and leverage of AI you possibly can to help you buy back that time, so that you can have the internal freedom to be able to give more and do more of those lively things. And so some of the systems that I create, within what I was talking about, you got to know how to market, you sell, do the fulfillment, and then the AI, and then systems and teams, right? And so systems are huge, but you also have to build a team to follow those systems. And that's hard for an entrepreneur, because we're wired to be doing the work, but not showing people how to do the work. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. I don't know if you guys have had any bosses like this, but I've had bosses that just are great hustlers. They're great solopreneurs, and I would, I've seen these guys. They run an amazing, business, but then they have all these other side hustles. I remember like driving with one of, my old bosses that are really respected. He had a real estate portfolio, and he would go by these restaurants that would have those like gumball machines, and like go collect the quarters, and then one day he'd be having like a refrigerator that he would go and find. I don't know where he got this refrigerator, but he's taking it to one of his, his buildings and from his tenants. He's just always hustling and grinding. But, to be honest, he didn't have the greatest marriage. His kids really didn't, love him because he wasn't around. And I was like, I didn't want that. But it was because he didn't know how to delegate. And as much as I knew how to run his own business on one of them, it was hard for him to let go. to have empowered someone to do it because he felt like he needed to do it. And so I was like, I don't want to be that person. I want to learn how to delegate and empower people to do it. And so it's just looking at what are the systems to do it. And so I just really try to replicate myself as much as I possibly can. And running a marketing agency, you learned a lot of that. And so you have to productize your offering in such a way where you can have repeatable systems of what I did. And so I created systems and then having people run those systems. And this was before AI too, to leverage all that stuff. And that was harder without AI. Now it's a lot easier with AI to leverage some of this stuff. But if you could build the system that someone can run and create, is the best thing. And I'll give you the other example of this. That's the operation side. You also need to figure out how do you replicate yourself on the marketing and on sales, and even the content you need to create to build a personal brand, right? And so even in the sales teams that I help, the greatest salespeople are the ones that follow the script, you know? And so it's like they can have syntax of it. Like I know that you're a big component where it's like you want to, you did it better than your previous boss before you started your businesses. Like you said the other day on your stuff on the podcast, but like if you could create a game plan that someone can replicate and win, even if it's like 80% of what you were there, then it's better than nothing. So, yeah.
No, I believe in that. I think when we were talking about scripts, like what I realized from my previous boss's scripts, right, was that there was components to the script. There was a flow to the script, right? And it was like, I covered all the same flows at the same points, but I just said it a little differently, right? And because like how the speech in word for word didn't sound like me, so it came off disingenuous. And so realizing for like the gym, the franchise, like we don't have traditional scripts that it's like full paragraphs. It's pretty much bullet points of topic, and basic transitions of how to continue the flow through it, and then essentially the tiers off of the client or customer's answers. All right. And so there is still a script, just, you do have to have that. I think the hard part again about systems is people like us, we do things and we learn things and we start to do them without creating a system, not knowing that we're even doing them. I learned firsthand when I launched the franchise side that I was doing things without even realizing that I was doing it, or thought that everyone just knew that you needed to do these things. And so when my business partner was, not doing that and our business was taking a dip while I was launching the franchise, I was like, dude, what's going on? And he was like, dude, I'm trying to figure it out. I don't know what's missing. And I was like, well, you do A, B, C. And he was like, well, I didn't know that. And I was like, dang. I was like, common sense is only common to the person that knows it. And that was that light bulb that, went off with me. And I realized that. A question that I have for you though, too, because like the AI freedom it's interesting. And I have my opinion on it, but then you mentioned something. So I think we are aligned in this is I think some people rely too much on AI when believe me, a lot could be integrated into AI. But in my opinion is that there still needs to be a human component and a team component to that. What are your thoughts on that? Like, meaning that if someone wanted to just replace their whole team with just AI and so forth versus that human component aspect to it?
It's a tool, right? It's a tool. And I want everybody on my team to learn it. It's not an either or now. It's baked into everything. And so everybody has to adopt or die. And so there's people that have taken, hard lines on both. And so I would say that there's a balance. And this is what I mean by it. There's one thing that AI can't replace, and that's human interaction. They can do like simulations of versions of it, but ultimately like there's senses of like community and like vibing with people that AI can't do. And so there's a thing called EQ, right? So emotional intelligence that AI can't necessarily pick up on yet.
Sure.
But that's a component of things that won't replace AI. We're always going to need human interaction. And when you do that, you got to learn how to lead people really well with that. And so here's a really unique thing that I didn't understand, but it's really important, is we're now in a generation that we have 5 generations in the workforce right now. 5. Isn't that wild? So, I mean, before, in the generations past, there wasn't that many. Like, people would retire and you had a few generations working in the workplace. But our grandpa is working, as well as, the 16-year-old that just got a job, and all those generations in between. And each of them have different drives, momentums, motives, everything like this, their background, their experience that play into the workforce, that have different perspectives on how you can motivate and lead each of those people. So it's, if you can learn the EQ of like what's driving people and motivating people on different ages and what they're driving for, it's way different than anything before. And so this is really where learning to lead is going to be really, really helpful. And there's books out there, there's resources to really kind of help people learn that. But AI is a tool. So I use it and it can get me 80 to 90% there, but I still need to fine tune and tweak it, right? People do the copy and paste thing with AI and they don't even read it. And that's a detriment to, SEO, that's detriment to content, it's detriment. So you just have to tweak it. They can get you partway there, but you need to tweak it in the human element to make it your voice and your style to do that.
No, yeah, exactly. It is a great tool, but like you said, you still have a team that's using it, right? And instead of it being your team, right? And that's where I think some people are trying to replace it. And again, it's not 100% there yet. I mean, I saw this ad, I think it was an ad, where an AI bot, which sounded like a person, like a legit person, was calling someone, and it was like 2:30 in the morning, and it was essentially a sales pitch, or a sales pitch / confirmation. And the guy's like, you're calling me at 2:30. He's like, oh yeah, exactly. But just to confirm. And I was just like, dude, if someone called me at 2:30 in the morning to confirm an appointment, I was like, you're probably not going to have that appointment with me anymore. Like, but I think it is so true. Like it's an amazing tool, but it is a tool, right? So you have your agency, and then you realize that, this is awesome, but you wanted to make another pivot, which I think is amazing, because I believe that at any time you can pivot, you can adjust, you can, find a new version of you, or, kind of find a new passion. What was that shift of going from marketing agency to high ticket sales?
There's a big overlap of marketing and sales. Like, I did it because it was like I had sold my business and I was like, what do I do now? And, my wife was like, we just had another kid. And I remember the first year of our first kid didn't let us sleep. And so it was just like, if I built another business right now, I just probably wouldn't do the best, at gate. So let me just like do that. And it was fun. It was not difficult because it was just one thing I had to do. And then I just learned a lot from it and managed team. And it was fun. I enjoyed that part because it was just in the stride of like communicating, and doing that type of stuff. So it was cool to learn those sort of things, and then learning how to manage teams even more. And then the reason why now I'm doing what I'm doing is because there's a balance of a business. Every business starts with a transaction of money. So so it comes with selling something. So the clients that I work with, it's like, you got to sell it. So let's help you figure out what that irresistible offer is, and then knowing how to pitch it and have that. And sales comes down to 2 things, I realized. Confidence in yourself, like we talked about, and who made you and why you're made for the rest of your life, right? And if you have that anchors in, and then you have more confidence, a little bit more about who you are and what you're there for. And then the other part is conviction about what you're selling will help that other person. And I could be horrible about sales and have that conviction and still sell 30% of the time. That's what I realized around this stuff, is like, just my passion around what I'm selling is what converts, right? And so what got me from 0 to 30% close was my conviction, and then learning the skills of objection handling and communicating and asking the right questions and everything like that was where I got the 40 to 60% close, right? And so this is really where it's like, when you're looking at sales, it's definitely tact, but it's really just conviction. And so I don't know if you've encountered this, but like when new salespeople start, all they know is conviction that this is the number one thing. Why isn't everybody buying this? I don't get what it is. And based off of that conviction and ignorance of the fact that most salespeople get rejected more than they are, then it starts wearing on people. But if you tell them like, hey, you're a rock star if you can, be rejected 80% of the time, it's not easy to deal with that. But learning sales is a skill that everybody needs to have if they want to start a business or have a good career in sales. And so those are really good stuff. And then there's a big overlap with marketing and sales. I want to mention that. Like I could be a great person, but if I don't have any leads, then I'm struggling. Or if I have all the leads but horrible at sales, I'm still going to be struggling. So you need to have an overlap of balance, and those are really cool aspects of the business to scale and grow. And I'll add this one part: everything that you're doing in your life and your business, you got to build a personal brand. Okay, got to build a personal brand. One of my mentors went and asked Richard Branson, you know who he is. He's the guy that has the Virgin Records, Virgin Air. He has 400 plus companies. So to give you a perspective on something that I learned about this, most of his companies that he has over 400 plus with were franchised from his name, meaning he didn't necessarily start all those. They franchised the name because of the branding of how important that was. Something that everybody will carry the rest of their life is their personal brand. So build a personal brand. So if like you're doing sales or if you're doing marketing, document some of those things, give value, grow an audience, and that's going to continue to add that for the rest of your life. Yeah.
No, that's huge. I mean, that's crazy, and Richard Branson is, definitely one of the legends. And I think that selling and being able to sell is a skill that everyone needs to have. And everyone kind of has that initial, because at the same time, if you're single right now, well, you need to learn how to sell yourself better. And that's why you don't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband or a wife, right? At the end of the day, you're selling yourself to why you're the best, spouse, why you're the best person for the job, why you're, that's all sales as well. High ticket sales and, that nature, it's just that next level of that. But at the same time, you have to learn that for anything in any industry, job, and I promise you'll do a lot better. But as we wrap up, I like to ask one final question, and this is the legacy wall question, right? So on Nathan's legacy wall, you can leave one message, right, short or long, that you've learned along your life's journey, along all the pivots. What would be the message that you leave for the up and coming generations?
Life is short, and you got to know Jesus. If you don't know Jesus, you're going to have a harder life. And then, we're made for eternity, right? We're designed for eternity. And that's why there's so many people that have existential crisis, because they don't know where they're going after death. And they think they're, live forever. And that's not the case. And so people need to know Jesus. So pick up a Bible, go to church, meet some people that, love Jesus. And, that's the answer to life right there. We're not the main person in the story. It's Jesus. We're just kind of like the behind the scenes people trying to make an impact as best we can to point people to Jesus. Yep.
No, I love it. Where can people connect with you and learn more about what you have going on with your coaching, with your high ticket sales?
Yeah. So if someone's wanted to build an online business, reach out to me on Instagram. I have a full playbook to help them with sales playbook or an EA playbook. They can DM me on Instagram, and I can give those playbooks for anybody that's listening that wants some really good resources they're building. DM me, and I'll give those over to them. They can follow me mostly on Instagram is where I'm at. I'm building my YouTube channel. I have my own podcast as well that I interview high performers, so they can go check out on YouTube. But I'm everywhere as well, omnipresent.
Awesome. And then, all of his stuff was going to be in the show notes, guys. If you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the video description. But honestly, guys, make sure you guys share this episode with a friend. Leave us that 5-star review, because it does help spread the message. But at the same time, you sharing with a friend helps your friend, your family member, your spouse level up, which in turn levels you up because you're surrounding yourself with higher frequency people. But Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to run it back.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Don't negative vibe. It's only positive thoughts, cause in the game of life, mindset calls the shots. Got my mind on the prize, I can't be distracted. I stay on my grind, no time to